The Gang of Four, Schumer, McConnell, and by the way, their power flipped today in the midst of this. Pelosi and McCarthy, where are they all? What do you reckon they're talking about?
Well, I think that they must feel a deep sense of embarrassment that they've enabled Trump, and that they can see now the cost. These images today, I think, have done more to undermine the future of the Trump insurgency, if you will, than anything else. People look at these images of people kind of luxuriating in Speaker Pelosi's office like they own it, or cavorting in the Senate chamber, and people are disgusted by that. So I think if you're Speaker Pelosi, you probably, as embarrassing and upsetting as this is, you feel that this movement has blown itself up in some ways. I think McConnell made clear this morning before this assault on the Capitol that he couldn't abide Trump's lawlessness, Trump's defiance of the election result. He jumped ship visibly and publicly. So I think the conversation, I can't guess what Pence is thinking, but I think the conversation among House and Senate Republicans is we need to be very careful. This is now a movement that Americans are going to look at and say, that doesn't look like something I want to be part of.
Sorry for the delay there. This is Rachel Maddow jumping in from the other side of the studio here in New York. Mr. Ignatius, thanks so much for joining us. I'm struck by these two really rich loads of reporting that you have had recently. One, which you were just describing, this desire, concern among upper reaches of the military that the president not be allowed to effectively invoke military force to protect his presidency, and seeing today there being no visible use of the military in a way that might have created a sort of martyrdom moment for the protesters. On the other hand, though, you've also had this very rich load of reporting about the preparations for today's events, describing, you reported yesterday, planning for this week's protest has been coordinated by an interagency team headed by the acting attorney general and the acting defense secretary and secretaries of Homeland Security and Interior, backed by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And from your reporting, I felt very comforted that there was a lot more planning than we had expected, that as you reported, if they tried to storm the Capitol, they would be arrested. And I do feel like there's a big difference between having tanks in the streets and having a Tiananmen moment for these protesters, a Tiananmen moment of martyrdom, and them being able to run freely through the Capitol today and not get arrested and cause all the damage that they did. It feels like whatever planning happened, they were underprepared for the amount of violence that was brought to bear against the building.
I think you put it exactly right, Rachel. I think they were right not to want to militarize this. They thought they had adequate forces. They thought that the 6,000 to 8,000 DC police plus FBI plus SWAT teams, law enforcement people from various federal agencies that they were gathering would be sufficient. They put a lot of reliance on the Capitol Police, and I think as we look back at what happened, that was misplaced. But I do think you're right. They were underprepared. They were sensible in not wanting this to look like a military confrontation. But the coordination, the ability to move as quickly as the protesters, the insurgents did, was lacking. And I think that's going to be at the center of the examination that should take place about what happened. But again, I think the importance of the fact that this movement of this insurgency has undermined its cause with actions that seem to repel even the most passionate critics of Biden's election, people who are part of this challenge to the certification of the Electoral College vote. I think that's really important. It's a big part of what happened today is that this movement essentially popped its own balloon.
In terms of the preparations that you were able to report on and the thinking of the people involved in sort of bracing for this moment, which I think did go off the rails in a way that wasn't anticipated. Should we expect that people who broke into the Capitol and broke those windows and carried firearms into the district and committed all these other federal crimes that we've seen committed today on tape and in film, should we expect that they'll be prosecuted? Is that a policy decision for the incoming Justice Department? Is that something that U.S. attorneys will be allowed to pursue?
Well, it's the right question. Obviously, it's a question for the new administration, but I would think that law enforcement, the FBI, the Capitol Police itself are just deeply embarrassed and enraged at what was done today, and they will want to be. They'll be at the front of those wanting prosecution of the people who vandalized, invaded, and vandalized the Capitol. So I think there's going to be a movement inside from federal law enforcement itself demanding this. Again, as people, talking to my sources tonight before coming on the air, what I heard was, we think the right force was in place, but we can't answer the question of why it didn't move more quickly and decisively in the key moments before the Capitol was invaded.
David Ignatius, Washington Post, a foreign affairs columnist, and so much more. Sir, it's an honor to have you with us here tonight to help us understand this ongoing situation. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jimmy Kimmel. Thank you for joining us for the treason finale of the Donald Trump era. This was one of those days that I always assumed was behind us. This is not the sort of thing that I ever imagined would happen in this country in my lifetime. The President of the United States, because he is too angry, insecure, and too incompetent to deal with the fact that he lost an election, a fair election, an election that was no different than any other election, an election he lost by 7 million votes and 70 electors, turns an angry mob against members of Congress and his own vice president, not to mention endangering the Capitol Police, those blue lives he claims matter so much to him. Trumpers today reached the Capitol walls. They stormed the Senate chamber, fighting with police, breaking windows, stealing things. Weirdly, the only respect that was shown was for the velvet ropes. For whatever reason, stayed within the velvet ropes. Maybe they should put those around the whole building. roamed the halls, they broke into offices. This creep took a seat at Nancy Pelosi's desk, took a piece of mail off her desk. The Capitol was besieged by MAGA hatters in all manner of crazy Price is Right audience, forcibly taking control of the Plinko wheel. There was a man dressed up as a Viking in the Capitol building. This guy made up off of the podium. Lawmakers had to scramble to the basement for cover. Mitch McConnell had to crawl into his protective shell. Mike Pence was evacuated. Earlier in the day, Mike Pence almost evacuated himself when
I will start a single player
tell him he would not be doing his bidding. Trump really
game
put
of
the squeeze on the
Trajan
old
because
Pence
I don't wanna
dispenser last night. He wrote, "If
be
Vice
king."
President Mike Pence comes through for us, we will win the presidency." And he kept that up this
Go.
morning. Wrote, "All Mike Pence has to do is send them back to the States and we win. Do it, Mike. This is a time for extreme courage." Instead, the vice poodle took a little dump in Trump's golden slippers. If thinking your vice president can award you a presidency you didn't win isn't delusion, I don't know what is. But apparently that was finally too much for Mike Pence,
Right.
who released a statement today. It said, "It is my considered judgment that my vote to support and defend the Constitution constrains me from claiming unilateral authority to determine which electoral votes should be counted and which should not." And that statement went over about as well as you might have expected. When Trump lashed out, Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to
He
protect our
didn't
country
have the courage.
and our Constitution. Wow, you know what? First him and Kanye, and now Trump and Pence. Very sad. Trump was reportedly still stewing, angry at Mike Pence when he made the speech today that caused all this mess. Benedict Donald made an appearance at what was billed as the Rally to Save America. His speech was historic. Never before have so many people gathered to watch a president masturbate. After almost 2 hours of rioting
It's really
on the Capitol, the National Guard was called in. Slowly, police
Animal
were
husbandry.
very laid back compared to the Black Lives Matter protests.
Scouts.
Some were seen taking selfies with the criminals. Others seemed to welcome them through the gates. It was a terrible day in the history of this country. Our president and the scumbags who kept this stolen election charade going, and that's you, Josh Hawley, that's you, Ted Cruz, either intentionally or just wildly irresponsibly
It's not
lit
wrong.
these fires to start a war
Not
just
wrong.
to distract us from the fact that Donald Trump lost the election. Ted Cruz, this guy doesn't even believe the election was stolen. He knows better than that. He's so hungry for political power. He's so desperate to be liked and supported by these nuts who think Joe Biden is a Chinese agent and Satan is trying to force them to wear masks to the mall so that one day he can be president. He's willing to roll the dice on a civil war. Same with Josh Hawley, who had
Right.
a very friendly wave with the invaders today. Same with Kevin McCarthy and Rudy Giuliani, Jim Jordan, Devin Nunes, and especially Donald Trump. These people are not Americans. There's no we the people. There's me the people. And that's it. And the wildest part is these MAGA marchers think Donald Trump cares about them.
The game
He doesn't
audio
care
doesn't seem
about
to be
you.
working.
He doesn't care about your
Sometimes I have to
life, or your
reboot.
wife, or your job, or your health care, or the air you breathe, or the water you drink. He cares about himself.